Welcome to Satsang. We start in here always with a question that's come in from our online family audience. And then we'll open it up to any questions that any of you might have. There's a microphone right here in the middle, so if you have a question, feel free to come and share your name. And if you feel more comfortable asking in Hindi than in English, that's also fine. I can translate it for everybody else. तो आप ऐसे मत सोचिएगा कि अंग्रेजी में ही पूछना पड़ेगा. कोई बात नहीं, हिंदी में पूछिएगा, मैं translate कर लेती हूँ. But just starting with the one from our online family. How do we live in Nirvana? Asked by Partik. So, in different religious traditions, different spiritual lineages, different philosophies and cultures and languages, we use different words for that ultimate state. Whether we speak about moksha, freedom, liberation, whether we speak about nirvana, whether we speak about heaven, whatever word we use, ultimately the aspect is we're talking about a state of being, of mind, in which we are free. We're full of joy, we're full of light, we're not bound, we're not stuck, we're expansive. And the way to live there is to let go of all of that keeps you from there. Because all of those states of being are our natural way. It was at the school yesterday. I thought it was in the Arti. Yesterday, we had a beautiful Diwali celebration at one of the free schools that we run in Rishikesh. And when Pujya Swamiji was speaking to the children, he was sharing from when he was young and living in the Himalayas, how one of the saints there had given him a sutra for life. And it works better in Hindi, so I'm going to give it in Hindi, but then I'll give the English translation. And the Hindi says, Bolo Jeevan kaisa hai, jaisa bana lo, वैसा है. चाहे इसको स्वर्ग बना लो, चाहे इसको नरक बना लो. बोलो जीवन कैसा है, जैसा बना लो, वैसा है. And what it means is, life is what you make it. Whether you make it heaven or whether you make it hell. Life is what you make it. That state of moksha, that state of liberation, that state of heaven, that state of nirvana is ours if we are able to be free from the things that keep us living stuck. What is it that steals our freedom? What is it that steals our peace? What is it that steals our joy? How to live in the North? Well, let go of the South. How to live in the West? Let go of the East. You know, we're holding on to suffering. If you say to anybody, what is it that makes you suffer? Like, why are you in this moment at this time of your life suffering? Almost all of us, perhaps all of us, but if not all, almost all of us, will blame someone or something for why we are suffering. Someone is not acting, living, being, treating us in the way that we think they should. It might be a loved one. It might be someone at the office. It might be our elected official. But someone in the world is acting and living and choosing in such a way that it has stolen my peace. Or someone at some point in my life prior to this did something to me that I am still suffering from. So I'm depressed, or I have PTSD, or I'm anxious, or I'm an addict, because at this time of my life, here is what happened. Perpetrators are human beings sometimes. Sometimes the perpetrators are a law of nature, a fire, an earthquake, a flood, a tragic illness. Sometimes they're just what we call acts of God. A car accident, an airplane accident. Something happened, not our fault, that was done to us by a person, by the universe, by God, by the weather, that has created our suffering today. Whether somebody's doing it to us in the present moment or they did it a long time ago. Almost all of our suffering, we would explain away by that. And in order to live in Nirvana, or to live in moksha, to live in that, what we call Padam Anand, that highest state of bliss, you have to let go of that. It's our identification with that that keeps us stuck. We're holding on to it. We're holding on to an expectation, to an attachment, to a story. And I don't say this to minimize that. Tragic things have happened to many of us. People have acted in ways that are amoral, wrong, sometimes illegal even. Things have happened. But our holding on to that, our identification with that, is what is keeping us from living in Nirvana. So in order to live in Nirvana, you've got to let go of that which you're holding onto, that which you're lugging around. And the solution, as with so many of these, is to let go. You know, when you travel these days, as the years go by, they put more and more restrictions on what you're allowed to carry on the plane, right? No liquids. Now, you know, take your shoes off. Now, it's like sort of whatever anybody does, it changes what we're allowed to bring on. None of this, not your toothpaste, not your cream, not this, no water bottle, no, nothing. Bag has to be this big. All these restrictions about what you can take. Minimizing, 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 minimizing. And life is kind of the same. I mean, if you said, no, I'm not going to travel without my kitchen sink, the TSA guys would say, sorry, ma'am, you can't board the flight. Like, they're not going to budge. They're not going to say, oh, no problem, take your kitchen sink, we'll make an exception for you. They're not going to budge. Your bag doesn't fit? Sorry. Life is kind of the same way. If you want to stay stuck, stay home with your kitchen sink, no problem. But if you want to move forward, you've got to be prepared to let it go. Leave it behind. You can't take it with you. And on our path to nirvana, to moksha, to liberation, we have to be prepared to let go of the ignorance, the attachments, the stories. And only then can we enter that sacred and divine space. So yeah, it's very simple. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it is very simple. Yeah, other questions that anyone here has? Yes?
Namaste. Thank you so much. My mother is a textbook narcissist. And my question is, how do you suggest to deal with a person like that? She's gotten older, and I feel it's gotten worse. And how do you deal with the resentment?
Great question. First of all, in general, neuroses, personality disorders, they all get worse with age. So if you today are struggling with anxiety, this, that, whatever it may be, if you've got an idea that there's something not quite so anchored in peace and love and ultimate well-being about your personality, work on it now. It's just going to get worse as you age. These things tend to crystallize as we age. So that's not surprising. Dealing with anyone with a personality disorder is a real big challenge because the key underlying definition and similarity of all of the personality disorders is that the person who has them doesn't think there's anything wrong with them. If I have anxiety, or I have depression, or I have addiction, or I have fear, phobias, I'm aware that there's a problem. I suffer. I want solutions to that. But if you suffer from a personality disorder, they don't think they have a problem. They think everyone else is the problem. So the first most important piece to realize is you're not going to change them. They're not things that people typically change from, heal from, recover from. And they certainly don't until and unless for some miraculous reason they realize they've got a problem and they want help. But by definition, they don't realize they have a problem. They don't want help. It's not that none of them do, but typically by definition they don't. Which means you've got to establish boundaries. You've got to acknowledge that this person isn't going to change. You have to acknowledge that they do not see that their behavior is problematic. And you need to navigate your life in such a way that it doesn't depend upon them changing or them realizing that they are problematic. And it's a beautiful opportunity to experience compassion and love from a distance. And to experience compassion and love without any expectation. Dealing with narcissistic personality disorder is a huge challenge. I'm sorry that you've dealt with this your entire life. What I would say at this advanced age of your mother is simply treat her with as much love as you can muster up in the moment. Keep visits short. Keep them spaced as you need to space them so that when you are with her, the love can be genuine. Do not expect that it's going to get better. Do not expect that if you try to make her understand X, Y, and Z, if she hasn't changed till this point, it's not going to happen. But take it as a spiritual opportunity for you in unconditional love. Can you walk into those encounters knowing exactly how she is, exactly how she's always been, and find love for her anyway? And bring that to the table. But I know you've got kids. And you've got to, luckily they're now old enough, but you do have to, on some level, be the mediator between her and your kids in such a way that they don't end up getting hurt. And help them understand that, okay, grandma is like this. Even though we know that it's not right by a lot of our standards of what we would consider ethical behavior, dharmic behavior, compassionate behavior, behavior of integrity, we love her anyway. She's our grandma. Give them a lesson in unconditional love at this age. And be the father figure that protects them from getting hurt by how she's being. And just allow yourself to acknowledge, okay, here we are. This is how she is. And find that love. Find that compassion for her and for you. And don't try to expect things from yourself that are unreasonable. If someone were physically sick, COVID is a fantastic example when we were all going through the pandemic. In a lot of houses, you had situations where someone had COVID in the house. And for whatever logistic reason, everybody else could not go out and stay in a hotel. And so you had people living in one house with one person maybe who had COVID and other people who didn't. And everybody understood the rules, like don't get too close. Make sure you wear a mask. When she's in the kitchen, don't be in the kitchen. Because you understood it wasn't that you were going to kick her out onto the street or kill her. You love her just as much. You have as much compassion for her. But it doesn't make any sense for you to tend to her at her bedside and then also catch COVID and be useless to her and anyone else. So we understood logistically how to live in close quarters with someone who was sick without getting sick ourselves. And it's a really good model for living with someone who is diseased in the brain and whose dis-ease has a similar energetic contagion on other people. It's not that she gives narcissistic disorder to people, but she causes pain and suffering in others due to her internal dis-ease. And so you move through it carefully. Protect yourself, protect the kids, with love and compassion for her. Be as close as you can be without it impacting you in a negative way. But just last point on this, given her advanced age. In your self-love and in your self-compassion, make sure that whether it's 1 year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, that she's no longer in her body. that you don't end up with regrets. Live in such a way today that your heart and your conscience are totally clear and you don't have any sense of, I should have, I could have, because that's just as detrimental and just as painful as the energy that she shares when she's alive. So live with the love, the compassion, letting go of attachments, of expectations for your spiritual progress now, for her now, and also for your own centering, grounding, and emotional health when she's not here in her body anymore. Yeah. Yes.
Namaste.
Namaste.
My name is Roberto. In many of our societies, if not most, sex is attached to the emotion of guilt by the way it's seen and the upbringing. My question is, how to identify when it can actually be, I don't know, a celebration of the human connection, and when it's not serving its purpose?
Sex and guilt. So, according to the Vedic Sanatan Dharma spiritual tradition, the ultimate purpose of our life is self-realization, God-realization. That's our ultimate purpose. That's why we are here, is to realize the divine in ourselves, as ourselves, that we are inseparable from that. All of that which we do, if it is on the highest level, should be in service of that. And whether it's our actual meditation, prayers, seva, or whether it's the work that we do. Because as we are walking toward self-realization, God-realization, a huge piece of that is this human body, our karmic journey, this reincarnation where our individual soul takes new birth and new bodies to work out its karmic journey. We're here with duty. We're here with dharma, purpose. And so all of that which we do should be in alignment with that. Sex. On the most simple and basic level, the dharma of people who are in the householder phase of life is to have a family. Not that it's compulsory by any means, but it's part of the dharma. And so in that way, sex is a non-negotiable requirement to fulfill that aspect of the dharma. Nothing to feel guilty about. You're just doing your dharma. But it's not something that's supposed to be taken as just a job, an act. One of the ways to the divine is through relationship. Bhakti, devotion, love for the divine, is one of the most powerful paths to connect with the divine. But for a lot of people, the idea of loving God is really hard to access, especially people from the West, but not only people from the West. the idea of like, well, which God and how, and like nameless, formless reality, like how do you really love that? And it's hard to generate that. A lot of people feel like they've been hurt by God. A lot of people feel sort of allergic to the whole God religion thing for a variety of reasons. And so there's a whole lot of people for whom that deep, ecstatic, full love for God isn't accessible. Well, you can get there through deep, full love for another human being. This is where it gets tricky, though, because sex tends to be wrapped up with lust. And here's what it looks like. Think for a moment about vision and consciousness, okay? Love is expansive. Love is, right? Love is melting and merging, and you just are swooning and swimming, and it's expansive, your heart is opening, all of that. What does lust do? It does this. Think about times when you are feeling actually lustful. It narrows our vision. It becomes a gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it, now, 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 yes, 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 right? The whole vision, the attention, the awareness goes from expansiveness to narrowness. Vision gets very narrow. That's the danger with sex, is it takes us from spirit into only a very, very, very narrow focus awareness of a specific part of the body in a very specific way and a very specific agenda, and it's got to be just exactly right, right there, right here, right now, right like this. It's pulled us out of expansiveness, out of the truth of who we are. Now, that being said, can sex be used by two people in a dharmic relationship as a way of experiencing the divine? Absolutely. But it's got to be conscious. It's got to be conscious because every biological urge in the body is all about lust. We are physically, evolutionarily programmed to just have as many babies as we can. Evolution doesn't care if we attain enlightenment. It just cares that we pop out babies. So at that time, you've got to be really conscious, really deliberate, really careful. And there are practices. I mean, there are entire practices based on this conscious connection, such that through coming together with another being, you experience a loss of where you end and the rest of the world begins. And that's a very spiritual experience. I mean, ultimately, that is the point, is to realize I'm not, like, just this is not me. I'm energy. And when you have sex, one of the beautiful spiritual things that arises, even if it's purely lustful, is for just a brief moment, a split second, there's a loss of sense of individual body into a merging. Unfortunately, if it's just lust, it's over in 2 minutes and you haven't actually gained anything from the experience. And that's where it's seen as non-functional, not helpful, not in alignment with spiritual practice. Because what it's doing is reinforcing a narrow vision. It's reinforcing your identification as the body. It's reinforcing objectification of yourself and others. This being is an object who is going to give you pleasure. You are an object that is experiencing pleasure. So it's pulling you out of truth. But if you, in a dharmic relationship, in a spiritual connection, can use that as a part, not the only piece, but a part of traveling to the divine together, then absolutely it can become part of your spiritual relationship. Guilt in general is something I think is never helpful. I think a lot of our religions give it to us because it keeps us in line. You know, the more guilty you feel, the worse you feel about yourself, the more likely you are to obey what somebody else tells you to do. And so we become very good sheep if we feel really guilty and sinful and awful and all of that. So I'm not in favor of guilt, but I am in favor of regret for decisions that we make that are not in alignment with our higher path. Because regret is good. Regret helps us look at something and say, not such a great choice. Dissipated energy unnecessarily, because that's another piece, by the way. In the yogic traditions, there's a lot of teachings around what we speak of as ojas, which is literally the energy of the body. And it said that when you have sex, that ojas is actually released from the body, that you are losing ojas. And so there's a lot of literature around loss of physical, mental, spiritual vitality due to having too much sex. It also happens from thinking about sex too much, by the way. So it's not enough to just stop yourself from doing it. You actually have to also stop thinking about it all the time. That it actually dissipates that ojas, that vital energy in the body. Which is one of the reasons that there's such a large monastic tradition of celibate monastics. Lots of reasons for it, but one reason is the conservation of that ojas. And you'll see even married couples who are on, say, a spiritual pilgrimage, or at certain spiritual times, holidays, different times, they will abstain sexually. Because they want to make sure that they have all of their internal vitality full, because they're going to a sacred temple, they're performing a sacred puja. And you don't want to have lost any of that sacred energy. So, nothing to feel guilty about. But be conscious about it. You know, we talk in here about being conscious all the time, whether it's doing business consciously, whether it's shopping consciously, whether it's eating or dressing consciously. Take sex and make it something you do consciously. You're not a response to a stimulus. You know, Pavlov did this famous experiment with dogs. Stimulus response, stimulus response. We are not Pavlov's dogs. We are conscious divine beings. But every time that you do something, whether it's eat, whether it's yell, whether it's hit, whether it's have sex, based on some just internal rush of hormones or chemicals or neurotransmitters or whatever it is that's made you hit that person or eat the chocolate cake that you didn't want to eat or have sex with the person you didn't want to have sex with. You've literally just
So my question is regarding the birth and death. We
I'm sorry,
know
regarding?
birth and death. Birth
Birth and death. Okay.
When we say person is dead, which means the soul leaves the body, right? So my question is that when soul enters the body, is it the very first day when new baby or new child comes into this earth, or whether it's in the mother's womb?
Great question. So in the Hindu tradition, we believe that the soul enters the physical body at conception. Because we believe that everything is purposeful. And that soul has consciously, purposely, in alignment with their karmic journey, their reincarnation, work it needs to do. That it will be the most conducive environment for that soul to take its next step closer to God. So yeah, we believe that at the moment of conception is when the soul enters the physical body.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Have a beautiful rest of your evening. Can we start with your question tomorrow? Excuse me. Are you here tomorrow? You're leaving. Okay, no problem. Yes, we'll take it. Yes.
Namaste. I have a family problem, and thank you. The husband of my eldest daughter abused of my youngest daughter. And after that, my eldest daughter continues with her husband, decided to have a child with him, and so now the family is kind of divided between her and my youngest daughter. And now my youngest daughter told me that, because in the beginning she didn't say to anybody because she was afraid she was going to break her sister's marriage.
Yeah.
And now she could talk to me, and it's very difficult because I don't know, they are both my daughters.
Does your elder daughter know what her husband did to her sister?
Yes, and she completely negates everything.
Okay.
She denies. Thank you.
So you are in a very tough situation. And just to acknowledge that there's no easy answer here. On a pragmatic and logistic level, your most important work is just going to be in your heart of holding both of your daughters in love. They're going to fight. They may gets the help that she needs, the psychological help, the spiritual help, to be able to forgive her sister's husband, and also to forgive her sister for enabling this, for continuing this. And I hope that she gets that help, because not only will it enable them to have a relationship again, but it will enable your younger daughter not to live in anger. I want her to forgive, not for your older daughter, but for her. Because if she holds on to that anger, she's going to suffer forever. She will suffer more from that than your older daughter will. Younger daughter will think I won't talk to her, I'll be angry, I'll make her suffer. But actually, she will suffer the most. So I hope that you can help her and encourage her to get the help she needs. Help her understand that this doesn't mean that she's at fault. Obviously, she's not at fault. Obviously, she is the wounded party here. But that holding anger and grudges and pain forever is just going to cause her harm. Get her some psychological help. Get her some spiritual counseling. Help her forgive, but not by minimizing what happened to her. So we acknowledge what happened, we support her in her anger of what happened, and we help her forgive so that poison does not kill her on the inside. Because anger is a poison. And with your older daughter, it sounds to me like she is probably very scared to even acknowledge what her husband might have done to her sister. And that's why she doesn't want to hear it and she negates it. A lot of times if we don't have a lot of self-confidence on a deep, deep level, if we don't have a lot of self-love on a deep level, we find ourselves with partners who are not the best human beings because we don't think that we are going to find anyone better. And even when they do things that should make us say, forget it, it's over, we don't say that because we're afraid. What if no one else ever loves me? What if I never find anyone else? And so instead, we close our eyes to what they're doing. And so hopefully you can help your daughter, your older daughter, find the confidence and the love in herself. Because if he abused your younger daughter, chances are he's abusing your older daughter as well. It's almost unheard of that abusers abuse only one person in their life. If he did it to one, chances are he's doing it to the other one. And especially if she's married to him. The abuse may look differently because she's a wife. To make decisions that are really right for her without feeling like she needs to stay with an abusive partner because she's worried that she won't find somebody again. And for you, just holding that love for both of them in your heart, pray for them. You know, as parents, it's so hard. You do everything, and then the world happens to them. And you'd love to protect them and, you know, keep them sheltered, and you can't. And all you can do is love them and pray for them. Yeah. And all of our prayers for them as well. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening, everyone. So much love to you.